The Shoulder Man on Federal Highway 57. Hello, Senor Williams. And hello to everyone in Carreteras de la Oscuridad. My name is Daniel Ortega. I'm a long-haul trucker, been doing it most of my adult life, and I'm writing because I heard a story on your channel about a road that keeps people. Mine did something similar. Turn off the lights if you can. Get comfortable. I'll keep it straight. That week, I was running Federal Highway 57 carrying sealed pallets of small appliances northbound. Nothing illegal, nothing fancy, just the kind of load thieves love because it sells fast. I was tired in a way sleep doesn't fix. My ex-wife was calling about late support payments. My mother's meds had gone up again. My bank app kept flashing red numbers like a warning. The cab smelled like old coffee and hot vinyl. My shirt stuck to my back. The AC worked, but only enough to remind you what comfort used to feel like. Around San Luis Potosi, the road opened into long dark stretches where the shoulder looks like it goes on forever. No houses, just scrub, fences, and the occasional cross on the side of the asphalt. I saw him the first time as headlights caught him at the edge of my beams. A man standing on the shoulder, facing the road, perfectly still. That's normal out there. People flag down rides, people break down, people do dumb things. But something about how still he was made my hands tighten on the wheel. He didn't wave, he didn't step back. He didn't turn his head as I passed. Just stood there like he'd been placed. A few minutes later, my radio hissed. Not music, not talk. A sound like breath pushed through teeth. I slapped the dashboard, checked the cord, checked the settings. The hiss stopped, then started again, deeper, like it was coming from behind me. I glanced at my side mirror. The shoulder man was there again. Not running, not walking. Just there, in the mirror's view, as if the truck had never passed him. My stomach sank, cold and heavy. I told myself it was another person, or my eyes, or the way fatigue makes patterns out of nothing. I took a sip of coffee and it tasted like metal. At the next gas station, I pulled in under white lights that made everything look sick. A couple of other rigs sat idling. Two men near the bathrooms watched me the way people watch a wallet on legs. Inside, the cashier was a teenage boy with a tired face. I paid, bought water, tried to shake the feeling off. When I walked back out, I saw something on my trailer door. A smear, like a handprint in dust, but too long. Fingers too thin. Like someone pressed a glove filled with bones against the metal. I wiped it with my sleeve. The dust came off, but the shape stayed, faint like a stain. A driver at the next pump glanced at it and looked away too fast. "You see that?" I asked him. He shrugged without meeting my eyes. "Don't stop on the shoulder tonight," he said, like he was giving advice about potholes. "Just don't." Back on the highway, I stayed in the right lane, steady speed, both hands locked in place. Then my CB radio popped with a voice that wasn't mine. Not words. Just a low, steady hum, like somebody humming behind a closed door. I turned it off. The humming continued in the cab. I could feel it in the steering wheel, in the seat, in my teeth. When I finally saw the man again, he wasn't on the shoulder. He was on the divider close enough that his outline was sharp. His clothes looked like dark workwear, but wrong. Too flat, like the night itself shaped into a person. No face I could describe, just a suggestion of one. He lifted his arm and pointed, straight at my trailer latch. And at that exact moment, my trailer jerked like something had hit it. I didn't stop. I couldn't. Stopping out there is a decision you don't get to undo. I drove until I hit a rest area with security lights and other engines. I got out with my flashlight shaking in my hand. The latch was still locked. But on the metal beside it, someone had scratched a line. One long groove, then another, like tally marks started and left unfinished. I sleep with earplugs now. I avoid that stretch when I can. And if I see anyone standing too still on the shoulder, I don't look twice. Advice: if your gut tells you not to stop, listen. Pride won't tow you out of a bad decision. And now, another story, this one from a roadside motel where the walls are thin and the night it has too many hiding places. Room 12. Never checked out. Buenas noches, Senor Williams. Good evening, community. My name is Marina Valdez. I worked the night desk at a roadside motel outside Culiacan, Sinaloa. I'm writing because you once read a story about a motel that repeats certain nights. Mine didn't repeat. It kept moving forward, toward something I couldn't stop. If you're trying to sleep, I'm sorry, but I need to leave this somewhere other than my head. I took that job after my divorce. I needed steady money. I needed hours that didn't put me face to face with people who asked questions I couldn't answer. Nights were easier. Less talking, less pretending. The motel smelled like bleach and wet concrete. The lobby fan clicked as it spun, like a slow clock. Behind the counter, I kept a small heater because the cold at 3 a.m. gets into your bones even in Sinaloa. The night started normal. A dusty pickup rolled in with two men inside. They didn't look like tourists. They didn't look like they wanted a room. They looked like they wanted to know if I would ask for ID. One of them leaned on the counter. "Room?" he said. Short, flat, no smile. "Names for the register?" I asked, because policy is policy until someone decides it isn't. He stared at me. The other man looked past my shoulder, studying the hallway like he'd already walked it before. "Just give the key," the first one said. I swallowed my pride. I wrote down something fake, handed over room 12, and watched them walk out. An hour later, the lobby phone rang. No caller ID, just a blank line. I answered, "Front desk." "Nothing?" Then I heard breathing. Slow, wet, like someone holding the mouthpiece too close. "Hello?" I said again. A faint sound came through like fabric dragged across tile. Then the line went dead. I told myself it was one of the men playing games, or a wrong number, or a child. You tell yourself anything that keeps you from feeling helpless. At around 2:30, I did what I always did, checked the hallway camera. The monitor showed the corridor outside room 12. The door was closed. The hallway lights flickered the way they always flickered, like the building was tired. And then the image stuttered. For a second, the screen went gray. When it came back, the door to room 12 was open, but nobody was visible. I watched, leaning closer. The door slowly moved like an invisible hand was pushing it wider. Then, on the floor, I saw footprints appear. Not muddy, not wet, not bloody, just darkened shapes, like the carpet was remembering pressure that wasn't there. One step, then another, coming out of room 12, heading toward the stairs. I grabbed my keys, pepper spray, and walked into the hallway because my job made me brave in stupid ways. The corridor smelled like cigarette smoke and cheap cologne. I approached room 12 and knocked. No answer. I knocked again, louder. "Sir, motel staff." Silence. I pushed the door with my foot. The room was empty. Beds made, TV off, curtains closed, no bags, no shoes, no bodies. Nothing. But the air felt wrong. Cold, like a refrigerated aisle. The kind of cold that doesn't belong in a cheap motel. On the nightstand, the room key sat upright, balanced on its edge like someone had placed it there carefully. And the bathroom light was on. I walked in and looked at the mirror. At first, I only saw myself. Tired eyes, hair pulled back too tight, A woman trying to look tough. Then the mirror fogged in one corner, like someone exhaled onto it. A message formed in the fog, traced by something I couldn't see. Not words I can repeat neatly. Just a shape that looked like a road, drawn with a shaking line, and a small mark beside it, like a person standing on the shoulder. I backed up so fast I hit the door frame. In the hallway, I heard footsteps running, real ones, heavy and fast. I turned and saw one of the men from earlier coming up the stairs, face tight with panic. "Did you go in there?" he snapped. Yes, I said. "Your room was open?" He stared past me into the room. His lips moved like he was counting under his breath. "Don't do that," he said quietly. "You don't open that door at night." "What is this?" I asked. "Where's your friend?" He didn't answer. He grabbed the key off the nightstand, but his hand shook when he touched it. "We're leaving," he muttered, "right now." "You already paid," I said, because I didn't know what else to say. He looked at me like money was a joke. "Keep it." They drove off 5 minutes later. Tires squealing. Engine screaming down the highway. I watched from the lobby window until their taillights disappeared. Then the phone rang again. Same blank line. I answered with my voice low. "Front desk." This time, I heard something like a slow scrape, like nails on a door. Then, very softly, the faint click of a motel key turning in a lock. Room 12. I quit the next morning. I didn't even wait for my paycheck. And I still don't stay in roadside motels unless I can see the parking lot from my bed. Advice: if a place feels like it has a routine you don't understand, don't try to learn it alone. Let's move to another kind of night job, one that stinks of rot and diesel, where the city leaves its secrets on the curb. The dumpster that breathed back. Hello, Senor Williams, and hello to everyone listening. My name is Joel Serrano. I worked sanitation in Monterrey night route. I'm writing because I used to listen to Carreteras de la Oscuridad during pickups, and one story about small footsteps made me realize I wasn't imagining mine. Lights off, volume low. I'll tell you what happened. Sanitation work is simple on paper. You lift, you throw, you keep moving. But the city is never clean. It just changes hands. My partner, Java, used to joke that we were the only people who saw Monterrey asleep. He died the month before. Work accident, quick, unfair. After that, every night felt heavier. I kept thinking I heard his laugh in the truck cab. I kept reaching for my phone to text him. My supervisor didn't care. Route doesn't stop, he said. Grief doesn't pay overtime. That night, the air smelled like rain that never arrived. The truck's hydraulics whined like an animal. My gloves were damp with old grease. My knees hurt. My mind was somewhere else. We hit an alley behind a row of closed restaurants. The dumpsters back there always had the worst smell. Old meat, bleach, fryer oil, a sour beer. The kind of smell that sticks to your throat. My new partner, Nico, hopped down and banged the side of the dumpster with his boot. "Full," he said. I walked up and grabbed the lid. Before I opened it, I heard something. Not a cat, not a rat. A slow inhale. Like the dumpster itself took a breath. I froze, lid half lifted. Nico laughed. "You scared of trash now?" "I heard something," I said. He shrugged. "Probably a dog." I lifted the lid fully. The smell hit like a wall. I turned my face away, eyes watering. Then I looked inside. Black bags, cardboard, a broken chair, normal. But in the middle, tucked between bags, I saw a small plastic shoe. A child's shoe, clean, too clean to be there. I pointed. "That shouldn't be here." Nico leaned closer and his grin faded. "Someone dumped it," he said, but his voice was weaker. As I stared, the shoe shifted slightly, not falling, not sliding down, just moving, like something below it adjusted. I dropped the lid hard. The bang echoed through the alley. Nico stepped back. What the hell? We should have left, I know that. But the job does something to you. It teaches you to pretend nothing matters. It teaches you to touch what other people refuse to touch. I hooked the dumpster to the lift. As the hydraulics raised it, I heard it again. That inhale. And then a sound like tiny fingers tapping metal from inside. Nico jumped onto the truck's step. "Drop it," he snapped. "Drop it now." "I can't," I said, eyes on the controls. "It's mid-lift." The dumpster tipped over the truck's mouth. Bags fell, boxes fell, loose trash spilled. And then, for half a second, something else appeared. A small shape clinging to the inside wall, thin arms, pale skin, head lowered like it didn't want to be seen. Not a person you can describe, more like a suggestion of one. Like the alley light couldn't fully draw it. No face, just darkness where a face should be. It didn't speak. It only turned its head slightly, like it was listening to me breathe. I slammed the controls and lowered the dumpster too fast. The metal shook, trash splattered. Nico shouted, "Go! Go! Go!" We didn't even finish the block. We drove with the back, still messy, trash bouncing. Supervisor be damned. At the next stop under a streetlight, I checked the load with my flashlight. The child's shoe was there, resting on top of the trash, placed carefully like someone arranged it. Inside it, something was folded. A small piece of paper, damp but not torn. It was a receipt from a restaurant behind us. The date was from years ago, and on it, in pen, was a name. Java. My dead partner. I didn't tell Nico, I didn't tell my boss. I threw the shoe into the compactor at the landfill and watched it vanish. But some nights, when I pass alleys that smell like old oil and bleach, I hear that inhale again, close to my ear like a breath behind the world. Advice: don't open what you don't have to open. Some things get thrown away for a reason. One more shift change, one more set of walls. This next story comes from behind bars, where silence has weight. The cell that stayed occupied. Hello, Senor Williams. Good night, everyone. My name is Luis Mena. I was a guard at Topo Chico back when it still ran like a city inside a city. I'm writing because I heard someone on your channel talk about a place that had a wrong room. In my prison, it was a wrong cell. Turn the light off if you can. This one is easier to hear in the dark. Prisons have routines that keep you sane. Count heads, check locks, walk the line. Ignore the stories, ignore your own thoughts. I wasn't good at ignoring mine. My brother was in trouble outside. Debts, wrong people, the kind of mistakes that drag families down. I took extra shifts, hoping money could fix what fear had already started. Night shift smells like sweat trapped in concrete, like disinfectant that never wins, like old food and rust. That night, the radios kept cutting out. A static burst every few minutes. The older guards blamed the weather. The newer ones blamed cheap equipment. I blamed the building. There was one cell on my block that everyone avoided during rounds. Not officially, nobody wrote it down, but it was understood. The cell was supposed to be empty. An inmate died there during a lockdown years earlier. Not a murder you could prove, not a death you could explain cleanly. After that, the paperwork said vacant, but the door stayed locked. I didn't believe in haunted prisons. I believed in desperate men and bad policies. Around 2 a.m., I did my round alone because my partner was in the bathroom too long, sick or hiding. I didn't care. When I reached that cell, I heard something behind the door. A slow, steady sound. Not words, not sobbing, A soft scraping, like fingernails dragged across concrete in a rhythm. I stopped with my flashlight beam on the lock. My skin went tight. I told myself it was a rat, a pipe. My imagination trying to earn overtime. Then my radio hissed, and in the hiss I heard a faint pattern, like breathing. I raised my radio. "Control, this is Mina. You copy?" The reply came delayed, stretched. "Copy, Mina." And then another voice cut in. A whispery sound that almost formed a name, but didn't. I backed up from the door. Behind me, an inmate called out from his bunk. "Guard," he said, voice low. "Don't stand there." I turned my light on him. "You talking to me?" He nodded once, eyes wide. "That one, don't sleep," he said. "That one listens." "Who?" I asked. He swallowed, then looked away like saying it would cost him. "The one that didn't leave." I should have walked away, but pride is a sickness in uniform. I stepped closer to the cell door and put my ear near the metal. The scraping stopped. The air felt colder, like a freezer door opened behind me. Then, very softly, something touched the other side of the door. Not a punch, not a kick. A palm, flat, slow, pressing, like it was matching my position. I pulled back so hard my shoulder hit the bars across the hall. The inmate whispered, "See?" My partner finally came back, pale, wiping his mouth. "You okay?" he asked. I didn't answer. I couldn't. Because the cell door's small window, its metal cover, was slightly open now. And I knew it had been closed. I knew the policy. I knew the screws. I walked up with my flashlight, hand shaking, and aimed the beam through the gap. Inside was darkness and the outline of a bunk. And on the lower bunk, I saw a shape sitting upright. Not moving, not speaking, just sitting there like it was waiting for the count. My partner swore and grabbed my arm. "Nope," he said. "We're calling it in." We did. We brought 2 supervisors. When they arrived, the window cover was closed again. Perfectly, like it had never been touched. They opened the door with keys. They went in with lights. Empty cell, dust, old stains, no person, no animal, nothing. One supervisor glared at us. "You 2 want to get written up?" he snapped. My partner shook his head hard. "No, sir." But as we walked away, my radio hissed again. And this time, clear as anything, I heard fingernails scraping inside the speaker. Slow and rhythmic, like someone was tapping from a place with no signal. I transferred blocks the next week. I still check locks twice, and I still don't lean close to metal doors at night. Advice. In places built to hold people, you learn fast that not everything inside is human. And now, one more story before dawn. This one from a city edge where a woman cleaned houses by day and tried to survive nights by bus. The Canal Woman in Ciudad Juarez. Hello, Senor Williams, and good night to the community. My name is Adriana Rios. I worked as a domestic cleaner in Ciudad Juarez, and I'm writing because I heard a story on Carreteras de la Oscuridad about a voice that wasn't a voice. Mine wasn't either. It was a sound you feel more than you hear. If you're trying to sleep, I won't drag this out, but I need you to understand. This happened on a normal night. I was coming home from a long shift. The family I worked for had a big house that always smelled like lemon cleaner and money. I cleaned floors so shiny you could see your own tired face in them. I was doing it because my father was sick, because my boyfriend had started drinking more than he worked, because rent doesn't care if you're exhausted. I caught the late bus near a convenience store. The air was cold and dry, and the streetlights made everything look gray. There were only a few passengers. A man in a hoodie sitting near the back, too still. A woman with grocery bags. A teenager staring at his phone. I sat by the window and watched the city slide by. At one point, the bus passed near a canal, one of those concrete channels where water runs low most of the year. The area around it was dark, empty lots, stray dogs. That's when I heard it. A sound like a woman crying, but far away. Not loud, not dramatic, just steady, like grief on repeat. The driver didn't react, nobody else did. I wondered if I imagined it. Then the man in the hoodie stood up and moved closer to me. My stomach tightened. Human danger is the kind you recognize fast. He sat in the seat across the aisle, close enough that I could smell cigarette smoke on his clothes. "You got a phone?" he asked. I lied. "No." He smiled without warmth. "Don't lie," he said softly. "I saw you looking at it earlier. I hadn't even taken it out." My hands went cold. Outside, the canal ran alongside the road for a stretch, black and empty. The crying sound grew a little louder. The driver hit a pothole and cursed under his breath. The bus lights flickered once. In the flicker, I saw something outside. A woman standing down in the canal, looking up at the road. Her hair was long and dark, hanging forward like a curtain. Her dress looked pale in the streetlight, almost white. She didn't wave. She didn't chase. She just turned her head slowly, like she was following the bus with her attention. The man across from me watched my face. "You see something?" he asked. I swallowed. "No." His smile faded. "You lying again." He reached into his jacket pocket, not pulling anything out fully, just letting me know he had something there. The woman's crying stopped. The silence after it was worse. Then, from the back of the bus, the grocery bag woman whispered, "Madre de Dios," like she saw it too. The driver looked in the rearview mirror, his eyes suddenly wide. He didn't stop the bus. He sped up. The man across from me leaned closer. "Give me your—" He didn't finish. Because the bus went cold. Not air conditioning cold. Cold, like walking into a shadow. The windows fogged at the edges. My breath became visible. And in the glass beside my face, I saw a reflection that didn't match the inside of the bus. I saw the canal woman's face, close to the window, like she was walking right outside us, matching our speed, her head angled toward me. But the bus was moving too fast. No one could walk that fast in the canal. The man across from me froze. His confident posture collapsed into something smaller. He whispered, "No," like a child. His hand came out of his pocket empty. Whatever he had, he decided not to show it. The driver crossed himself with one hand on the wheel. "No miren," he muttered. "Don't look." I couldn't stop looking. The reflection moved as if the woman's mouth was near the glass, not speaking, just exhaling. And the glass fogged in the shape of a handprint, long fingers pressed from the outside. Then the bus hit the end of the canal stretch and turned into brighter streets. The cold lifted like a heavy blanket pulled off. The man in the hoodie stumbled to the front and got off at the next stop without looking back. I rode the rest of the way shaking, my phone still in my bag, untouched. I don't know if that woman saved me from him, or if she was drawn by my fear. I only know I don't take that route anymore. Advice: if a place has a story you grew up hearing, don't mock it at night. The night doesn't care what you believe. The desert dog that walked like a man. Hello, Senor Williams. Hello, community. My name is Efrain Molina. I'm a mechanic by trade, but for a while I was also a migrant moving north through Sonora, trying to find work and send money home. I'm writing because I heard your stories about roads and deserts, and people disappearing between towns. I almost became one of those names. If you're listening in bed, keep your eyes closed. The desert is easier to picture that way. We moved at night with a guide. Everyone calls them something different, but the truth is simple. You pay someone to take you where you can't safely go alone. I was doing it because my mother had diabetes and my daughter needed school supplies and my town had nothing left but empty promises. The desert smelled like dust and dead plants. The wind carried grit that scraped your teeth. Our water bottles were warm. The guide told us not to talk, not to use lights. Human danger was everywhere. People who hunt migrants like animals. People who sell you hope and then sell you again. But what happened to me wasn't only human. Around midnight, we stopped near a cluster of rocks. The guide crouched and listened. He held up a fist for silence. His eyes kept scanning the dark like he expected headlights. That's when we heard a dog. A low whine in the distance. Someone behind me whispered, "There are no dogs out here." The guide hissed, "Shut up!" The whine came closer. Then it stopped. We waited. Then something moved between the rocks. At first, I thought it was a stray, thin, cautious. But it stepped into a patch of moonlight and I saw its legs. Too long. Joints wrong. Like a dog built from a bad memory of a dog. It didn't run. It didn't bark. It stood and stared at us. The guide's face changed. Not fear, like a man seeing a gun. Fear, like a man seeing something that doesn't care about guns. He whispered, "No Maren." The same words that drivers said in my other story, "Don't look. But you always look." The creature moved again, slow and steady, and as it did, it rose, just a little, like it was shifting weight upward, testing a different posture. A man behind me made a small sound like a gasp. The guide grabbed his shoulder and squeezed hard. "Quiet," he mouthed. Then, from far off, we heard engines. Real human danger. Trucks or patrol, coming fast. The guide motioned for us to move. We started walking again, faster, feet crunching sand, breath controlled. I risked one last glance back. The creature was following. Not chasing, following. Keeping the same distance like it knew we couldn't outlast it. When the engines got closer, the guide pushed us into a shallow dip and told us to lie flat. We did. My face pressed into cold dirt, my heart hammered. Headlights swept over the desert. Men's voices shouted in Spanish, rough and impatient. I heard laughter. I heard a door slam. Then a silence fell. The voices stopped. Like someone cut sound from the world. I lifted my head slightly and saw something I still can't explain. The men with the trucks were standing near their vehicles, stiff, facing away from us. And behind them, in the dim light, that creature stood upright on two legs. Not fully human, not fully animal, just tall and wrong, with its head tilted as if it was listening to the men's fear. It didn't speak. It only leaned forward and inhaled, slow, like it was smelling them. One of the men turned his head like he wanted to look over his shoulder, and he stopped mid-motion as if his neck refused. Then the engines started again, suddenly, frantic. Tires spun, doors slammed. The trucks left fast, throwing dust into the air. The creature dropped back down and looked towards our dip, where we hid. I felt its attention like heat. The guide whispered, "Don't move." We lay there until the night turned lighter at the edges. By dawn, it was gone. We made it out days later, but I left something in that desert. Not my body, something else, a piece of calm I never got back. Advice: in the desert, your worst enemy isn't always a person. Sometimes, the land has its own patrol. The training range where shadows line up. Hello, Senor Williams, and good night to the audience. My name is Caleb Henson. I'm an Army mechanic. I was stationed near Fort Bliss for a time, and I'm writing because I heard people on your channel talk about bases that have dead corners. I found one. If you're trying to sleep, I'll be careful with details, but I won't soften it. We were out on a training range for vehicle recovery drills. Nothing glamorous. Sand, sweat, tools, and orders that never end. I was stressed because my wife back home was talking about separation, and my father stopped answering my calls. You carry that weight into the desert and pretend it doesn't matter. Late that night, I stayed behind to lock up the tool cage. The floodlights were on, humming, drawing insects into circles of light. I heard footsteps on gravel behind me. I turned. Who's there? No answer. I saw movement near the edge of the light. A figure standing just beyond where the floodlight reached. It didn't step forward. It didn't step back. It just held position like it belonged to the darkness. I assumed it was another soldier messing around. Not funny, I called. The figure shifted slightly, and I realized something that made my stomach drop. It wasn't casting a shadow. Everything else did. My body, the tool cage, the poles. But that figure stood like a cutout with no shadow behind it. I took one step toward it. The floodlight above me flickered once, like a blink. When it came back, the figure was closer. No footstep sound, no movement I could track, just closer. I backed up fast and my boot hit a wrench. Metal clanged loudly. From across the range, a voice called, "Henson, you good?" A real voice, a living person. I shouted back, "Yeah, just dropped something." The figure's head tilted toward the voice like it was listening. Then it tilted back to me. I ran to the nearest vehicle, jumped in, and slammed the door. My hands shook so hard I fumbled the key. The radio in the vehicle turned on by itself. Static, then a faint repeating tone, like a test signal. Then, through the static, I heard my own name in my own voice. Not spoken, not fully formed, just shaped by the static. "Henson, Henson." I turned the radio off. The voice continued in the silence, faint, like it was inside the cab. I looked out the windshield. Now, there were more figures at the edge of the light. Not moving, not speaking, just standing like they were lined up. And none of them cast shadows. My breath fogged the glass. The cab smelled like old plastic and sweat. I did the only thing I could think of. I hit the horn. The sound echoed across the range. The figures didn't react. But the floodlights along the poles flickered in sequence, one after another, like something walking through the power. Then the vehicle's interior light turned on, and I saw something in the passenger seat. A smear of dust on the vinyl shaped like a handprint, pressed down as if someone had just sat there. I didn't open the door. I didn't move. Across the range, that same soldier shouted again, closer now. "Henson!" His footsteps crunched gravel as he approached the vehicle. I waved desperately through the glass. He got to my door and yanked it open. "What's wrong with you?" The air outside felt warm again. Normal. I stumbled out and pointed. "Did you see them?" "The line." He stared where I pointed. There was nothing, just darkness beyond the lights. He squinted. "You're overtired," he said. "Go sleep." I tried, but that night in my bunk, I heard the same repeating tone in my head, like a radio stuck on a dead channel. The next morning, maintenance found the floodlight system had shorted overnight. No clear cause. I asked to transfer units later. They said no. You don't get to run from a base. But I avoid that range at night, and if I ever hear static when the radio is off, I don't try to fix it anymore. Advice: if a place feels like it's watching you, don't challenge it, just leave while you still can. The Alux under the roadside shrine. Hello, Senor Williams. Hello to everyone listening. My name is Victor May. I'm a delivery driver in Yucatan, and I'm writing because people think the peninsula is only beaches and tourists. But the roads out near the brush have old rules, and I broke one without knowing. If you're in bed, don't sit up, just listen. I was driving a small cargo van between towns, moving packages for an online company. The pay was low and the deadlines were brutal. I was deep in debt. My sister kept calling me because my nephew needed surgery. I started taking extra routes, night routes, anything. One night, a rainstorm hit hard. The road turned glossy black. The wipers slapped back and forth like nervous hands. Near a turnoff, I saw a small roadside shrine. Candles, a faded image, flowers and plastic bottles. People stop and leave coins there, not for show, for respect. I pulled over under a tree because I needed to check my GPS. The signal was bad. The rain was loud enough to make the world feel sealed. I got out and stepped near the shrine without thinking. My boot nudged something. A small pile of coins scattered near the base. I looked down. Then, like an idiot, I picked one up. It wasn't about greed, it was reflex. You see money on the ground and your hand moves. The moment the coin touched my palm, the air changed. The rain sounded farther away, like someone lowered the volume. My van's interior light flickered on. I turned and saw the passenger door open, slowly, like a careful person trying not to be noticed. I froze with the coin in my hand. I whispered, "Hello?" No answer. The door finished opening and stopped. Then I heard tiny footsteps in the wet grass. Not running, not walking like a child, more like quick taps, too light. I raised my flashlight and aimed it low. The beam caught nothing but plants and rain. But the van seat, my passenger seat, shifted slightly, like something climbed onto it. The vinyl creaked. I couldn't see anything sitting there. But the seatbelt lifted a little, pulled tight across empty air like it was being tested. My throat went dry. I remembered stories my grandmother used to tell, the ones you laugh at until you're alone. I turned back to the shrine and placed the coin down with both hands like an apology. "I didn't mean it," I said, voice shaking. "I'm sorry." The seatbelt loosened. The van door began to close by itself. Then I heard a soft tapping on the van window beside me. 3 quick taps, like small fingers. I didn't look, I swear I didn't. I got in, started the engine and drove. A few minutes later, my GPS finally got signal again. It rerouted me, same road, same direction, but the map showed a warning icon. The road ahead was marked as closed. In real life, it wasn't. The asphalt was clear. But something inside me refused to keep going, like the route itself had become wrong. I turned around and took a longer path that added an hour. The next day, I learned that there had been a crash on that closed stretch. Just after I would have passed it, a tree fell across the road during the storm. Maybe I would have hit it, maybe not. All I know is this: when I got home, my pocket felt heavy. I reached in and pulled out a coin, the same coin I put back, dry as bone. I left it at the shrine the next morning, and I never touched another offering again. Advice: don't take what isn't yours, especially when it was left for something you can't see. The weight of the passenger seat. Hello, Senor Williams. I've been a listener of Carreteras de la Oscuridad for 2 years now, tuning in while I haul freight across the border. My name is Ricardo, a trucker with nearly 2 decades on the road. I'm writing to you from a rest stop near Laredo because, Frankly, I'm afraid to get back into my cab tonight. I used to think the stories I heard on your channel were just campfire tales to keep us awake. But after what happened on the highway to Monterey 3 nights ago, I realized that the road has eyes. I was driving a heavy load of industrial machinery. It was around 3 a.m., that dead hour when the world feels like it belongs to the ghosts. I've been under a lot of stress lately. My youngest daughter is sick, and the medical bills are piling up faster than I can clear them. I've been pulling double shifts, living on bitter coffee and stale cigarettes. My mind was drifting to my debts when I saw him. A man standing on the shoulder of the road near the Cuesta de Mamulik. He didn't have a thumb out. He was just standing there, perfectly still, wearing a suit that looked way too formal for the middle of nowhere. I didn't stop. You never stop. But 5 miles later, as I checked my right side mirror to change lanes, I saw a reflection in the passenger seat. My heart didn't just race. It stopped. The man from the road was sitting there. He wasn't looking at me. He was staring straight ahead through the windshield. He didn't say a word. The air in the cab turned freezing, smelling of damp earth and old, copper-like iron. I tried to speak, to yell, but my throat was tight with a primal terror. I looked back at the road, then back at the seat. He was gone. But the truck started acting strange. The engine groaned as if I were pulling 3 times my weight. The suspension on the passenger side hissed, dipping low as if someone, or something, immensely heavy had just sat down. I looked at the seat again. It was empty, but the vinyl was depressed, slowly sinking under an invisible pressure. For the next 50 miles, I felt a hand, cold as a morgue slab, hovering just an inch from my neck. I could hear a faint, wet breathing that wasn't mine. Every time I passed a street lamp, the shadow in my cab wouldn't move with the light. It stayed fixed, looming over me. I reached my destination shaking, my hair turning gray in spots I swear weren't there before. I'm still driving, Senor Williams, because I have no choice. The bills don't pay themselves. But now, I never look at the passenger seat. I keep it covered with a heavy tarp, hoping that if I can't see the seat sink, maybe it isn't happening. My advice to my fellow brothers of the road: if you see someone in a suit standing on the shoulder in the middle of the night, don't even look at them. Just keep your eyes on the white line and pray. And now we move from the open road to the stifling silence of a luxury home, where the walls hold secrets the owners never intended to share. The basement's breath. Good evening, community. My name is Elena. For the last 10 years, I've worked as a domestic employee for a very wealthy family in the Lomas de Chapultepec neighborhood of Mexico City. I decided to write because I heard a story on the channel about a house with shifting shadows, and it gave me the courage to finally talk about why I quit my highest-paying job without even asking for my final paycheck. The house was a masterpiece of glass and stone, but it always felt heavy. My employers were distant, cold people who traveled often. I lived in a small room near the kitchen. At the time, I was struggling with the loss of my mother. I was in deep grief and felt incredibly isolated in that massive, silent mansion. I think that sadness made me a target. My instructions were simple: never enter the sub-basement. They told me it was just for the water pumps and old furniture. But at night, when the house was supposedly empty, I would hear a rhythmic thudding coming from beneath the floorboards. It sounded like someone dropping a heavy sack of flour over and over. One Tuesday, while the family was in Europe, the thudding didn't stop. It grew louder, accompanied by a sound like fingernails dragging across concrete. Driven by a mix of fear and a strange mournful curiosity, I took the master key and went down. The air in the sub-basement didn't smell like dust. It smelled like incense and something rotting, sweet and sickly. I found a door hidden behind a heavy velvet curtain. It wasn't locked. Inside wasn't a storage room. It was a small, circular chamber lit by flickering candles that never seemed to burn down. In the center sat a chair made of dark, unpolished wood, and sitting in that chair was something. It looked like a person draped in a heavy, tattered gray cloth. No skin was visible, only the shape of a slumped figure. I froze. I thought it was a statue until the cloth began to ripple. It didn't speak, it didn't scream, it simply leaned forward. I saw two hands emerge from the folds, pale, impossibly long fingers that moved like spiders. It began to gesture, pointing not at me, but at the shadow I cast on the wall. As it pointed, my own shadow began to warp, stretching and twisting as if it were trying to detach itself from my feet. I felt a sudden, crushing exhaustion, a coldness that seeped into my very bones, as if my life was being siphoned through my shadow into that room. I ran. I didn't grab my clothes. I didn't grab my ID. I ran out of that house and never looked back. I still have nightmares where I'm back in that basement, and my shadow is finally walking away from me. If you work in a house where there are forbidden rooms, Senor Williams, tell your listeners, stay out. Some things are kept behind doors for a reason, and curiosity is a price you can't afford to pay. From the secrets of the wealthy to the grit of the industrial night shift, where the machines aren't the only things humming in the dark. The clock out that never happened. Hello, Senor Williams, and hello to everyone listening. My name is Marcos. I worked as a night security guard at a textile factory on the outskirts of Ciudad Juarez for 6 years. I'm a man of facts, not fantasies. I've dealt with thieves, cartel scouts, and corrupt cops. I've never been afraid of the dark until last October. I was going through a rough patch, a messy divorce that left me sleeping in my car between shifts. I was tired, my nerves were frayed, and I was drinking too much coffee to stay alert. The factory was a labyrinth of rusting looms and high-voltage wires. My job was to do 3 rounds every night. During the 2 a.m. round, I started noticing things. The time card machine in the lobby would ding, as if someone had punched in. When I checked the cards, there was always one missing, the card of a worker who had passed away in a boiler accident 10 years prior. I brushed it off as a mechanical glitch. Then the smell started. The smell of scorched wool and burnt hair would fill a room, then vanish the moment I turned my flashlight toward it. One night, the motion sensors in the main warehouse started tripping. One by one, the lights flickered on in a sequence, leading toward the back of the building. I pulled my radio to call my partner, but all that came out was static. A static that sounded like hundreds of tiny voices whispering in unison, though I couldn't make out a single word. I followed the lights, my heart hammering against my ribs. In the very last aisle, standing by a dormant loom, was a figure. It was tall, wearing the blue overalls of the factory, but its proportions were all wrong. Its arms were too long, the elbows bending in ways a human's shouldn't. It was facing the wall, perfectly still. I drew my baton and shouted for it to identify itself. It didn't turn around. Instead, it began to grow. It didn't move its feet. It simply elongated, its head reaching toward the high rafters. The sound it made wasn't a voice. It was the sound of the factory itself. The grinding of gears, the hiss of steam, the snapping of belts, all coming from inside of its body. I backed away, trip-walking over a pallet. As I scrambled up, I saw its face in the reflection of a glass window. It had no eyes, just 2 deep, oily pits that seemed to pull the light out of the room. I didn't wait for it to move. I left my post, hopped the fence, and quit the next morning. Now, I work as a gardener. I only work while the sun is up. To anyone working the night shift in those old factories, if the machines start up on their own, don't go check on them. Just leave. Some places have a soul, and sometimes that soul is hungry for company. Our fourth account takes us to the vibrant but treacherous streets of Guadalajara, where a vendor discovers that the hunger of the streets isn't always for food. The tamale lady's silent customer. Buenas noches, Senor Williams. My name is Rosa. I've sold tamales on the corner near the old hospital in Guadalajara for 30 years. Everyone knows me. I'm writing because I've seen something that I can't explain, and it's been following me for weeks. I lost my only son to the violence here a few years ago. Since then, I've been a woman of routine. I wake up at 3 a.m., steam the husks, and set up my cart while the city is still gray and cold. My only problem is the loneliness. The silence of my house is sometimes louder than the traffic. A few weeks ago, a woman started appearing at my stand at exactly 4:15 a.m. She wore a long black rebozo that covered her face. She never spoke. She would just point to the tamales de dulce and hand me a coin. The coin was always cold, impossibly cold, like it had been sitting in a freezer. I'd wrap the tamales, and she'd drift away into the fog. One morning, the fog was particularly thick. The streetlights were flickering, struggling to stay on. When the woman arrived, she didn't point. She just stood there. I felt a sudden, overwhelming wave of grief wash over me. The same pain I felt the day I buried my son. It was so physical I had to lean against my cart. I looked down at her hands as I reached for a bag. Her skin wasn't skin. It looked like gray ash, crumbling at the edges. I looked up, and for a second, the rebozo slipped. There was no face, only a void where features should be, and within that void I saw the face of my son, screaming without a sound. I dropped the tongs. The woman didn't move, but the air around her began to vibrate with a low, mournful hum that made my teeth ache. I began to pray, the words stumbling out of my mouth. As I prayed, she began to fade, not by walking away, but by dissolving into the fog, piece by piece. But here's the thing, Senor Williams. Every morning, since then, I find a single corn husk sitting on my doorstep. It's always damp, and it smells like the earth of a fresh grave. I think she wants something from me, or maybe she's trying to bring my son back in a way that isn't right. My advice to those who work the early hours: don't look too closely at the faces of your customers in the dark. Some are just passing through, but others are looking for a way back in. Please tell your listeners to be careful. We continue our journey. This next story comes from a man who thought a quick stop at a roadside motel was the answer to his exhaustion. He was wrong. The guest in room 212. Hello, Senor Williams. I'm Javier. I'm a sales representative traveling the routes between Sinaloa and Durango. I spend more time in motels than I do in my own bed. I'm writing this because I can't stop looking over my shoulder. I've had a lot of stress lately. Financial pressures, a failing marriage, and I was driving on pure adrenaline. I decided to pull over at a small nameless motel off the highway. It looked decent enough, but the atmosphere was off. The clerk didn't look at me. He just stared at a small altar of the Santa Muerte behind the counter, his lips moving in a silent prayer. I was assigned room 212. As soon as I entered, I felt a heavy pressure on my chest. The room smelled of stale tobacco and a metallic scent, like blood that had been cleaned up with cheap bleach. I tried to sleep, but the wall shared with room 214 was thin. I started hearing a chanting. It wasn't loud, but it was persistent. A low, guttural drone that sounded like multiple men speaking in a language I didn't recognize. Then came the scratching. Thousands of tiny claws clicking against the other side of the wall. I looked at the gap under the connecting door. A dark, viscous liquid began to seep through. It wasn't blood. It was black, like oil, and it moved with a purpose, spreading across the carpet toward my bed. I jumped up and looked through the peephole into the hallway. There were 3 men standing outside room 214. They were dressed in expensive suits, but they were bone-thin, their skin stretched tight over their skulls. They weren't moving. They were just staring at my door. One of them held a small leather-bound book, and as he turned a page, the scratching in the walls grew deafening. Suddenly, the power went out. In the pitch black, I felt a hand brush against my ankle. It was small and cold. I scrambled for my keys, threw my bag over my shoulder, and bolted out the door. As I ran to my car, I glanced back at the window of room 212. The 3 men were inside my room, standing around the bed I'd just been lying in. They weren't looking for me. They were looking at the spot where my head had been. I didn't stop until I reached a well-lit gas station 50 miles away. When I checked my bag, I found a small carved bone tucked into the side pocket. I never put it there. I threw it into the brush and haven't stayed in a roadside motel since. If you're traveling those lonely stretches, Senor Williams, just keep driving. The fatigue is better than whatever is waiting for you in those rooms. From the isolation of the road to the outskirts of the city, where the trash we discard holds more than just memories. The Scavenger's Prize. Good evening, Senor Williams. My name is Beto. I've worked on a garbage truck in Ecatepec for 12 years. It's a hard job, and the things people throw away would surprise you. I'm in recovery now, trying to stay clean for my kids, and this job is all I have to keep me grounded. A few months ago, we were working a night route near an old, abandoned cemetery. We found a series of heavy black trash bags left near the gate. When we tossed them into the compactor, the machine groaned and jammed. That never happens with clothes or household waste. I climbed up to see what was stuck. Inside the hopper, the bag had torn open. It wasn't full of trash. It was full of small wax dolls, hundreds of them, all tied together with human hair. In the center of the mess was a larger figure carved from heavy wood, representing something that wasn't human. It had too many limbs and a face that looked like a scream caught in timber. Against my better judgment, I reached in to pull it out so the blades could turn. The moment my hand touched the wood, the world went silent. I couldn't hear the truck's engine or my partner shouting. I felt a surge of pure, unadulterated hatred flow into me. It wasn't my hatred. It was as if the wood itself was a vessel for 1,000 years of spite. I dropped the figure and jumped down. My partner asked if I was okay, but I couldn't speak. For the rest of the shift, I saw things in the shadows of the alleyways. Small, fast-moving shapes that skipped between the bins. They didn't have shadows. They made a sound like dry leaves skittering on pavement. When I got home, my house felt different. My dog refused to enter the kitchen. That night, I woke up to the sound of something heavy dragging across the roof. Thump, drag, thump, drag. I looked out the window and saw a figure sitting on the power lines, swinging its legs like a child. But it was too small to be a person, and its eyes reflected the moonlight like a cat's. It didn't attack. It just watched. It's been watching ever since. Every time I throw a bag into the truck, I wonder if I'm picking up another piece of its family. My advice: if you see something strange in the trash, leave it. Don't touch it, don't look at it, and definitely don't bring the memory of it home. Some things are thrown away because they are too dangerous to keep. Our next story takes us behind the bars of one of the country's most notorious prisons, where the walls are soaked in more than just regret. The empty cells echo. Greetings, Senor Williams. My name is Carlos. I spent 5 years in the Topo Chico prison before it was closed. I'm out now, trying to live a quiet life, but the things I heard in that place stay with me. I was a nobody in there, just trying to survive the gangs and the guards. I was assigned to a wing that was mostly empty. My cell was 402. The cell next to it, 404, was welded shut. No one ever went in, and no one was ever listed as being there. I was told it was because of structural issues, but the other inmates wouldn't even walk past it if they could help it. At night, the prison is never quiet. There's always shouting, the clanging of bars, the distant sound of someone crying. But in 404, the sound was different. It was a rhythmic tapping. Tap, 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 tap. It sounded like someone was using a small stone to write on the wall. One night, I was lying awake thinking about the family I had disappointed when I heard a whisper. It didn't come from the hallway. It came from the wall shared with 404. It wasn't a voice. It was more like the sound of wind through a crack, but it had a cadence. It was calling my name. I ignored it, but then the tapping started on my side of the wall. I looked at the concrete, and I saw the paint bubbling. Slowly, letters began to form in the grime and sweat of the wall. They weren't written with a pen. They were being etched from the inside out. It was a list of names. My name was at the bottom. I called for a guard, a guy named Ortega, who I was on decent terms with. When he saw the wall, his face went pale. He didn't say anything. He just opened my cell and moved me to a different wing, even though it meant I had to sleep on the floor of a crowded dorm. He told me later, over a smuggled cigarette, that 404 wasn't a cell. It was a sinkhole. Years ago, a prisoner who practiced certain dark arts had disappeared from that cell while it was locked. They never found him, but every person who stayed in 402 ended up leaving the prison in a black bag within a month. I'm lucky to be alive, Senor Williams. But sometimes, when I'm in my apartment, I hear a faint tapping on the wall behind my bed. I'm afraid to look and see if the paint is bubbling. If you ever find yourself in a place where the walls seem to have a memory, don't listen to what they have to say. Some stories are better left untold. We conclude tonight with a traveler caught between borders, discovering that the most dangerous predators aren't always the ones we expect. The Toll Bridge Shadow. Hello, Senor Williams. My name is Sophia. I'm a student who frequently travels between Texas and Tamaulipas to visit my grandmother. I've heard many stories on your channel about the dangers of the border, but I always thought being a woman alone was my biggest risk. I was wrong. The risk is much older than that. Last month, my car broke down about 3 miles from a toll booth. It was raining. A cold, torrential downpour that blurred the world into shades of gray. I was terrified of being kidnapped or carjacked, so I stayed inside with the doors locked, praying for a patrol car. A man approached my window. He looked like a regular traveler, jeans, a flannel shirt, a baseball cap. He looked concerned. He knocked gently and gestured for me to roll down the window. I only cracked it an inch. He offered to help me move the car to the shoulder or give me a lift to the booth. Something felt wrong. Even in the pouring rain, his clothes looked dry, and when the lightning flashed, I saw his shadow on the pavement. The shadow didn't have a hat. It didn't have a human head. It had the long, jagged snout of a wolf and ears that were far too long. I told him I had already called the police. He didn't leave. He just stood there, his hand resting on my door handle. I could hear his fingernails, if you could call them that, scratching against the metal. He didn't say a word, but his eyes began to glow with a faint yellow light that seemed to burn through the glass. I reached for my phone, but the screen was dead. The car's battery, which had been fine a minute ago, was completely drained. The man, or whatever he was, began to pull on the handle. The car started to rock. I felt a cold, crushing weight on my soul, as if he were pulling the air out of my lungs just by being near. Suddenly, a semi-truck blared its horn as it approached. The bright LED lights flooded the area. In the blink of an eye, the man was gone. Not running, just gone. When the trucker stopped to help me, he looked at my door and asked what I had hit. There were 5 deep, gouged furrows in the metal, as if a giant claw had tried to peel the door open. I don't travel at night anymore. I don't care how much I miss my family. If you're at the border and your car stalls, stay in the light. And for God's sake, don't look at the shadows of the people who offer to help. Thank you, Senor Williams, for giving us a place to share these burdens. To everyone listening, the roads are long and we are small. Stay safe. These have been the accounts for tonight. 8 lives touched by the inexplicable. 8 voices warning us from the darkness. Remember, the world is much larger and much older than the routines we use to hide from it. Keep your eyes on the road, but don't forget to check the mirrors. You never know who or what might be hitching a ride. The reflective vest on Federal 57. Hello, Senor Williams, and hello to the whole Carreteras de la Oscuridad community. My name is Javier Salgado. I'm a long-haul trucker, 15 years behind the wheel, and I'm writing because I heard a story on your channel about a driver who stopped at the wrong shoulder and never felt safe again. I thought it was just a story. Then something happened to me on Federal Highway 57, and I realized some roads don't forget you. I hope I don't interrupt your sleep, but I need to share this. That week, I was running a refrigerated load from San Luis Potosi toward Saltillo, pushing because money was tight. My ex-wife had started the paperwork, and the lawyer wanted a payment I didn't have. On top of that, my mom's sugar levels were out of control, and the pharmacy bill kept growing. I was living on gas station coffee and the kind of stress that makes your jaw hurt. My cab smelled like old diesel, menthol rub, and the sour sweetness of spilled energy drink. The vinyl seat had a crack on the left side that pinched the back of my thigh. Every bump on the road reminded me I hadn't slept more than 3 hours at a time in days. It was past midnight when the air turned colder, the way it does when you cross certain stretches outside Matehuala. The highway was mostly empty, just me, the hum of the tires, and the low whistle of wind slipping around the mirrors. I had my CB on because you don't drive that route at night without listening. The chatter was light. 2 guys arguing about which gas station had cleaner bathrooms, a driver warning about potholes, someone playing music too loud. Normal. Then the radio crackled and I heard my own voice. Not like. It sounded similar. I mean my exact tone, my exact pace, even the little breath I take before I speak on the mic. Blue Freight, copy? That's my company nickname. I felt my stomach tighten. My hand went cold around the steering wheel. At first, I thought it was a prank. People do that sometimes. They copy your call sign and mess with you, so I grabbed the mic. "This is Blue Freight," I said. "Who's that?" Static. Thick, heavy static, like someone dragging a chain across gravel. Then my voice again, faint and delayed, like an echo from somewhere too far down the road. "Don't stop, don't stop." I stared at the radio. The green display glowed steady. No warning lights, no reason for it to do that. I turned it down. Not off, just down, because part of me needed to hear if anyone else was around, but I didn't want to hear myself again. 10 minutes later, I saw the reflective vest. It was on the shoulder, just ahead, catching my headlights in bright, hard flashes. At first, it looked like a highway worker. A man standing with his back to traffic, slightly hunched, like he was checking something in the dirt. But there were no cones, no truck, no emergency lights, just that vest. As I got closer, I noticed something else. The vest wasn't moving with wind. The night was breezy. I could see dust shifting across the shoulder, but the vest stayed perfectly still, like it was pinned to the darkness. I flicked my high beams. The shape didn't change. My palms got sweaty. My mind started listing possibilities. Fake checkpoint, robbery setup, someone stranded trying to flag help. That route had seen all of it. I'd heard stories. Drivers pulled over by men with radios and official vests, never seen again. The thought of my mother getting a phone call instead of me showing up with money, it made my throat burn. I stayed in the right lane but didn't slow down. When my cab passed the figure, I forced myself to glance sideways. There was no face. Not in a horror movie way, no bloody mess, no screaming, just absence. The vest floated on a thin outline of shoulders and arms like a person-shaped shadow wearing safety gear. The reflective strips flashed, but beneath them the body looked like the inside of a closed closet. Deep, flat black. My chest tightened so hard I had to breathe through my teeth. I looked back to the road and told myself, keep going. Just keep going. That's when I saw it in my passenger mirror. The same reflective vest right beside my trailer. Matching speed, matching my lane, as if something was walking on air at 70 kilometers an hour, keeping pace inches from my freight. I blinked fast, thinking it was a trick of light, the way headlights sometimes bounce off metal and fool you, but the reflective strips were moving with me, steady and intentional. I grabbed the wheel harder. My shoulder muscles locked up. The CB hissed again. I hadn't touched it. I hadn't turned it back up. My voice came through, quiet and close, like someone speaking right next to my ear. Don't look at it. I didn't answer. I couldn't. My tongue felt too big for my mouth. A few kilometers later, I saw lights ahead, 2 vehicles parked on the shoulder, hazard lights blinking. At first, I felt relief. Other people, witnesses, safety. Then I noticed the way they were parked, angled outward, like they were ready to swing into the lane. And I saw the vests again, 2 of them, moving near the cars. Real vests this time, I told myself. Real men. Real problem. My heart hammered. If I slowed, they could box me in. If I tried to pass, they might throw something, shoot out tires, force me over. I'd heard of drivers getting trapped that way. I checked my mirrors. The reflective vest beside my trailer was still there. And then, just for a second, I saw something I still can't explain. The vest in my mirror wasn't walking anymore. It was turned toward the shoulder, toward those parked cars, like it was watching them. The moment I drew level with the cars, one of the men stepped toward the lane, lifting his hand. I didn't stop. I leaned on the horn, one hard blast, and swerved slightly left, just enough to show I was coming through. The man jerked back. I saw his face in my headlights. Young, tense, angry, real. In my mirror, the 2 men ran to their vehicles. One of the cars lunged onto the road behind me. My throat went dry. I could taste old coffee and fear. The chase lasted maybe 5 minutes, but it felt like an hour. The car stayed close, lights flashing, sometimes drifting toward my trailer like it wanted to clip me. I kept my speed steady, praying the road stayed clear. And the whole time, in my passenger mirror, the reflective vest stayed beside my trailer, calm, pacing, like it belonged there more than I did. Then the car behind me suddenly swerved. Not like the driver changed his mind, like something pulled him. The headlights jerked right, the car fishtailed, and in my mirror I saw it slide toward the shoulder. Dust exploded. The lights bounced wildly, then disappeared behind a rise. I didn't stop. I didn't look back again. I just drove, shaking so hard my knees knocked under the steering column. When I finally reached a well-lit gas station outside Saltillo, I parked under a lamp so bright it made my eyes ache. I sat there for a long time, hands on the wheel, breathing like I'd been underwater. The cab was silent except for the tick of cooling metal. I looked at my passenger mirror. Nothing. No vest, no shadow. Just the road behind me and the ordinary loneliness of a night highway. I tried to tell myself it was adrenaline, stress, sleep deprivation, the kind of mental glitch that happens when you're overloaded. But when I climbed down to check my trailer, because you always check after something like that, I found a smear on the side panel. Not blood, not scratches. A long streak of dust, cleanly wiped away in the exact shape of a handprint, fingers splayed, as if something had been pressed there while moving at speed. I didn't wash it off right away. I don't know why. Maybe because part of me wanted proof I wasn't losing my mind. Maybe because part of me was afraid to erase it. I still avoid that stretch of Federal 57 at night. I plan my runs so I cross it in daylight. And here's my advice, Senor Williams. Simple and not heroic. If you hear your own voice coming through the radio when you haven't keyed the mic, don't argue with it. Don't get curious. Just keep driving. Because sometimes the road warns you, and sometimes it follows. And now, another story, this one from the heat and noise of a Mexican night market, where the danger doesn't always come from the shadows you can see. The coins that rolled back under the stall. Hello, Senor Williams. Hello, everyone, from Carreteras de la Oscuridad. My name is Mariana Chitzel. I sell food at night markets in Merida, Yucatan. Tacos, tortas, whatever I can move fast. I'm writing because I used to listen to your channel with one earbud in while I worked, just to stay awake and calm. I never thought I'd become one of the voices. Apaguen la luz y prepárense para escuchar mi historia. Because what happened to me wasn't dramatic at first. It was small, quiet, the kind of thing you dismiss until it stacks up. I started that season exhausted. My father's kidneys were failing, and the clinic kept pushing appointments. My boyfriend had left the house 2 months earlier after we fought about money. I was alone, behind a hot grill, paying debts like I was scooping water out of a sinking boat. The market smelled like grease, warm tortillas, sweat, and sweet fruit. Music from a nearby stand mixed with the harsh metallic clink of cooking tools. My hands were always damp, either with oil or from washing them too much. On the first night, I noticed I was short on change. Not by a little, enough that it made no sense. A man paid with a large bill. I counted out coins and placed them in his palm. I watched him walk away. 2 minutes later, I reached into my cash box and realized the coins I'd used were back inside, stacked neatly like I'd never touched them. I thought I'd made a mistake. The next night, a different thing happened. A coin rolled. I was wiping the counter when I heard a soft tink, tink, like a peso coin bouncing on wood. I looked down and saw it roll from the edge of my stall towards the darkness underneath. Nobody was near. No wind. Just that coin moving like it had a purpose. I crouched, holding my phone light low. Under the stall was dust and dropped napkins and a plastic bottle. The coin kept rolling until it hit the back, then it stopped. Right beside it, I saw something else. Tiny footprints. Not animal, not shoes. Bare, small, pressed into the dust like someone had walked there. I sat up too fast and hit my head on the counter. I felt stupid, like I was scaring myself for nothing. But then my neighbor vendor, an older woman who sold agua fresca, leaned toward me and said quietly, "Don't chase what goes under your stall." I stared at her. What? She didn't smile. Just don't. That same night, 2 men came through the market in clean sneakers and expensive belts. They weren't shopping. They were collecting. Everyone knows about it, but nobody says the words out loud. The fee. The pressure. The way your stomach drops when you see them because you have kids, because you have parents, because you want to go home alive. They stopped at my stall. One of them looked at my grill like he was inspecting a car. "You're doing okay," he said. Not friendly, not angry. Just ownership. I handed over money with hands that didn't feel like mine. After they left, my legs shook so badly I had to sit on a crate behind the stall. My chest felt tight. I kept thinking, if I don't pay, they'll come back. If I keep paying, I'll never get out. I heard the coin rolling again. This time, it wasn't one. It was several. I watched them, horrified, as coins slipped from the edge of my counter. Coins I hadn't touched, rolling one after another into the darkness underneath. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. From under the stall came a soft sound, like fingernails tapping wood. Then a whispery rustle, like dry leaves being rubbed together. No words, just a sound that made my skin prickle. I stood slowly, forcing myself to keep my face calm because markets are full of people, and people see fear like blood in water. I pulled out my phone and called my cousin, who worked nearby. "Come to my stall," I said. "Now." "What's wrong?" "Just come." While I waited, I kept working. I served customers. I smiled. My hands moved on autopilot. But every time I stepped back, I felt like something was watching my ankles from below. When my cousin arrived, I pointed under the stall. He crouched, shone his flashlight, and frowned. "It's just trash." "Look at the dust," I said. He paused. The light trembled a little. "What is that?" The footprints were clearer now, a trail leading from the back of the stall toward the front, like something had walked closer while we weren't looking. My cousin stood up fast. "It's a kid playing." "No kid fits under there," I said, "and I would have seen them." He didn't answer. He just looked around the market like he expected someone to be laughing at us. That night, when we closed, the older Agua Fresca woman stopped me before I left. "You're Maya," she said, like it explained something. "My mother is," I answered. "My grandmother, too." She nodded slowly. "Then you know about the little ones." I didn't want to, but yes, I'd heard the stories. About Aluxes, small beings that live near old stones, near places that were here before we were. People say they can be playful. People say they can be cruel if you disrespect them. I'd always treated it like folklore, like something you say to kids so they don't wander. The woman continued. "They like shiny things, and they like fear. If you feed them fear, they'll stay." "What do I do?" I asked, hatefully, because I didn't want this problem on top of everything else. She looked at my stall, then at my face. "Don't chase, don't challenge, and don't promise them anything." The next night, the men came back earlier than usual. This time, they didn't talk much. One of them leaned close enough that I smelled his cologne. Sharp, expensive, almost medicinal. "You missed last week," he said. My heart dropped. "No, I didn't." He smiled without warmth. "Check your memory." I felt dizzy, because I knew I had paid. I remembered counting bills with shaking fingers. But then I thought of the coins returning to my cash box, the money moving without me. A cold realization spread through me. Something had been taking my change, my bills, my time, and I couldn't prove it. The men waited. I paid again, too much. After they left, I went behind my stall and cried silently into my apron, wiping tears fast so no one would see. Under the stall, I heard the rustle again. Then the tapping. Then a sound like a tiny laugh. No voice, no words, just the breathy rhythm of amusement. I snapped. Not proud, not brave, just tired. I grabbed a broom handle and jabbed it under the stall hard enough to make the wood thump. "Enough!" I hissed. "Leave me alone!" The market noise seemed to dim for a second, like my little corner had been wrapped in cotton. The tapping stopped, and then, very slowly, something rolled out from under the stall. A coin. It rolled to a stop near my foot. I stared at it. It wasn't mine. It was old, darkened, with a date I couldn't read. It looked like the kind of coin you find in the ground behind an old house. I didn't pick it up. That night, when I got home, my front door was unlocked. I know I locked it. I always lock it twice. Inside, nothing looked stolen. No broken drawers. No mess. But on my kitchen table, laid out carefully, were coins. Dozens of them. All different, old and new, some foreign, some that looked like they belonged in a museum. And in the center of them was my father's hospital bracelet, the one he'd worn last week, the one I'd thrown away. I stood there for a long time, arms hanging at my sides, feeling like I'd been watched the whole time I lived in that apartment. I moved stalls after that. Different market, different neighborhood. I told myself I was escaping the collectors, the stress, the bad luck. But sometimes, when it's late and the night air is humid and I'm counting change, one coin will roll on its own. Not far, just enough to remind me that some things don't let go. My advice, if you work a market at night and your money starts moving without you, don't get loud, don't get brave, and whatever you do, don't poke under the stall. And now, another story. This time from Ciudad Juarez, inside a quiet house where clean floors don't always mean the place is safe. The laundry room that smelled like wet earth. Hello, Senor Williams, and hello to everyone listening to Carreteras de la Oscuridad. My name is Lupita Rojas. I work as a live-in domestic worker in Ciudad Juarez. I'm writing because I heard someone on your channel talk about feeling watched in a house that wasn't theirs. And I thought, finally, someone understands I didn't want to write. I didn't want to remember, but I can't keep carrying it alone. Turn off the light and come with me. Because what I'm going to tell you happened in the middle of normal chores. The kind people don't believe can become dangerous. I started that job after my sister left for the border and disappeared. No goodbye, no message, just silence. My mother blamed me for not stopping her, like I had power over anything. I needed money to search, to pay for rides, to ask around. So when a family in a good neighborhood offered me a room and steady pay, I took it. The house was big, cold, and always smelled faintly of chlorine. The floors were so clean they shined, but the air felt heavy, like curtains closed too long. My boss, a woman in her 40s, was sharp with words and careful with appearances. Her husband traveled for work. Their teenage son barely looked at me. Most days, I worked quietly. Laundry, dishes, bathrooms, sweeping. I kept my head down. I didn't ask personal questions. I didn't talk about my sister. I didn't talk about the dreams where I saw her face behind dark glass. One night, my boss told me to wash a pile of clothes immediately because they had guests coming in the morning. It was late, past midnight. My body ached, my hands were dry from detergent. The laundry room was in the back of the house, near a small patio. The light flickered sometimes, the way cheap bulbs do. The washing machine vibrated hard, making the shelf above it rattle. I remember the smell, warm soap, and underneath it, something else. Wet earth. Like after rain, except it hadn't rained. I told myself it was the patio soil, maybe damp from watering plants. Then I heard a soft knock. Not from the front door, not from a window. From inside the laundry room. 3 slow taps, as if someone was knocking from the other side of the wall. I froze with a wet towel in my hands. The washing machine kept thumping. I listened. Nothing. I shook my head and kept folding, forcing my breath to stay even. Stress does strange things. Houses make sounds. Pipes knock. You imagine things when you're tired. Then the light flickered, and in that brief dip of brightness I saw footprints on the tile. Bare footprints. Wet. Leading from the patio door toward the washing machine. My throat tightened. I stared hard, waiting for them to fade like a trick of my eyes. They didn't. They stayed there, dark and glossy, like someone had walked in with feet soaked in mud water. I backed up slowly until my shoulder hit the doorframe. My skin crawled. I whispered, "Hello?" No answer. The footprints began to change. Not moving, not walking. They darkened, as if more water was soaking into the tile from inside them. And the smell of wet earth grew stronger, filling the room until it felt like I couldn't breathe without tasting dirt. I rushed to the patio door and yanked it open. The patio was empty. The night air was dry. No puddles, no wet ground. I slammed the door shut and turned back, and the footprints were gone. Clean tile, perfect shine, like nothing happened. I stood there trembling, feeling foolish and terrified at the same time. I wanted to wake my boss, but what would I say? There were ghost feet in your laundry room. She'd fire me. Or worse, she'd think I was trying to cause trouble. So I finished the laundry with shaking hands and went to my small room, locking the door. I lay down, fully dressed, phone in my palm, staring at the ceiling. I barely slept. The next day I tried to ignore it. I worked, I cooked, I answered in short sentences. I told myself it was exhaustion. That evening, I saw the sun watching me from the hallway. Not openly, just a quick glance, then he looked away. He seemed nervous. Later, when I took out the trash, I noticed something wedged behind the outdoor bins. A small cloth bundle. I shouldn't have touched it, I know that now. But I was thinking about my sister, about secrets, about things hidden in plain sight. I opened it. Inside were strands of hair tied with a black thread, and a little charm made of dried plant pieces. It smelled like smoke and old perfume. My stomach turned. I put it back and walked inside fast, heart racing. That night, the knocking came again. 3 taps. This time, it came from my bedroom wall. The wall that connected to the laundry room. My mouth went dry. I sat up in bed listening. 3 taps again. Slow. Patient. Then another sound, soft scraping, like nails dragging lightly over plaster. I pressed my ear to the wall. The scraping stopped. The washing machine wasn't running. The house was quiet. No pipes, no guests, no normal reason. And then I felt it, something like a breath through the wall, cold and damp, brushing my cheek. I stumbled back, almost falling. I turned on my phone flashlight and stared at the wall like it might open. Nothing. But the smell came back. Wet earth. Strong enough that my eyes watered. I didn't sleep at all. In the morning, my boss acted normal, but her eyes looked tired. The son wouldn't eat. He kept rubbing his wrists like they itched. When my boss left to run errands, the son approached me quietly in the kitchen. "Did you go outside last night?" he asked. My heart stopped. "No." He swallowed. "You heard it." My skin went cold. "What did you hear?" He looked toward the laundry room like it could hear him too. The knocking. I didn't answer. His face tightened. It started after my dad, after he brought someone here. My stomach sank. I didn't want family secrets. I didn't want danger. I wanted my pay and a safe bed. But the boy continued, voice low. "My mom found out. She did something. She paid someone to fix it." I stared at him. "Fix what?" He shook his head quickly. "I don't know, but now it's worse." That night, I tried to avoid the back of the house. I cleaned in the front rooms. I stayed near lights. I kept the TV on low in the kitchen just to have sound. Around 2 a.m, the power flickered. Just once. But enough to reset the microwave clock and make the house fall into silence. Then I heard the laundry room door open. Slowly. A soft creak. I stood frozen in the kitchen doorway, staring down the dark hallway. The laundry room light was off, but I could smell it. Wet earth. And something else. Like old sweet rot. I didn't move. In the darkness, I saw a shape shift near the floor, like a person crouched too low, moving without sound. It didn't stand up. It didn't rush me. It just moved, as if searching. I backed away silently, step by step, until I reached the front door. My hand shook so hard I could barely turn the lock. I slipped outside into the cold night air and stood on the front porch, breathing hard. From inside the house, I heard the 3 knocks again. This time, they weren't on a wall. They were on the front door, right behind my back. I didn't turn around. I walked away from that house at 3 a.m. with my phone, my documents, and nothing else. My boss called later, furious, saying I abandoned my job, saying I'd regret it. I didn't answer. I found another place to work. Smaller house. Less money. But I sleep. Mostly. Sometimes when I'm alone in a quiet room, I smell wet earth for no reason at all. And I remember those knocks. Patient, slow, like something that learned where I lived. My advice is simple. If you work in someone else's home and the house starts making sounds that feel like they're meant for you, don't be loyal, don't be polite. Leave. And now, another story. This one comes from a roadside motel where people rent rooms to disappear, and sometimes something checks in with them. The room with the mirror that didn't reflect right. Hello, Senor Williams. Hello to all of Carreteras de la Oscuridad. My name is Ivan Morales. I've worked the night desk at a roadside motel outside Culiacan, Sinaloa, near the highway for almost 6 years. I'm writing because your channel is full of stories that sound like mine. Places where people don't ask questions because questions get you hurt. I'm not brave. I'm not a hero. I'm just someone who watched something wrong happen too many times. Apaguen la luz. And listen, because this started like it always starts, with a normal shift and a bad feeling you try to ignore. Night shift at a motel teaches you the smell of trouble. It's cigarettes, cheap cologne, sweaty leather seats, the sharp bite of bleach trying to cover old stains. It's the sound of car doors closing softly, like someone trying not to wake the world. That month, I was already on edge. My brother had gotten mixed up with the wrong friends. He owed money. The kind of money you don't negotiate. I was picking up extra shifts, sleeping in the daytime with my phone on my chest like it could protect me. Around 1 a.m, a black SUV pulled in. Clean. New. Tinted windows so dark you couldn't see faces. 2 men stepped out. Quiet. They didn't look drunk. They didn't look lost. One of them wore a Santa Muerte pendant that glinted under the parking lot light. They came to the window. Room, the taller one said. I kept my voice calm. How many? He looked at me like the question was pointless. Just give. I slid the register book toward me, hands steady by practice. I need an ID. The shorter man leaned closer. No. There are rules in jobs like this, and then there are real rules. I gave them a room key without arguing. They didn't choose a room near the office, they chose one at the far end, where the lights are weaker and the camera angle doesn't reach the doors well. As they walked away, I noticed something that made my skin tighten. The taller man's shadow didn't match his movement. It lagged behind a half second like it had its own hesitation. I told myself it was the light, the angle, my tired brain. For an hour, nothing happened. I watched a small TV behind the desk with the volume low. I listened to the hum of the soda machine. I stared at the security monitor that always had static lines like scratches. Then the monitor flickered. Just that far hallway. The screen showed the door of their room. Closed. Still. But in the reflection of the hallway mirror, I saw someone standing behind me. Not behind the camera. Behind me, as if the mirror in the hallway was reflecting into the office. I spun around. The office was empty. The air felt colder. The back of my neck prickled. I turned back to the monitor. In the mirror on screen, the shape was still there. Tall, thin, standing too close to the office door. No face visible. Just a darker patch of darkness inside darkness. The hallway itself was empty. Only the mirror showed it. I swallowed hard, feeling my heartbeat in my throat. I stood slowly, keeping my movements controlled, like sudden motions might invite attention. I told myself, it's a camera glitch, a reflection artifact, static. Then the phone rang. The motel phone almost never rings at that hour unless there's a problem. I picked up. Front desk. Static. Not normal phone static, thicker, like wind through dry grass. No voice, no breathing, just that sound. I waited 3 seconds, then hung up. The monitor flickered again. In the mirror reflection, the shape had moved closer. It wasn't walking in the hallway. It wasn't opening doors. It was just closer, as if distance meant nothing to it. My mouth went dry. I grabbed the remote for the parking lot lights and turned them up brighter, flooding the far end with harsher light. For a second, the mirror reflection washed out. Then it came back sharper. The shape's outline looked wrong, like it was wearing something that didn't sit correctly on a body, like fabric draped over bone. And then I noticed the worst part. In the mirror reflection, the office door behind me looked slightly open. But when I looked at the real office door, it was closed. I stared at it until my eyes hurt. That's when someone knocked on the glass window. One of the men from the SUV stood there, expression flat. I flinched so hard my shoulders cramped. He tapped the window again, impatient. I slid it open a crack. "What do you need?" He didn't blink. "Another key." I kept my voice steady. "You said 2 people." He leaned closer, and I smelled his breath. Mint gum and something metallic underneath, like blood without seeing blood. "Give." I handed him another key card. As he walked away, I glanced at the monitor. In the mirror reflection, the shape was now standing at the far hallway, right behind him. Not touching him, not grabbing, just there. The man didn't react, didn't look back. He entered the room. The door closed. The monitor went black for 2 seconds, then returned. The mirror reflection was empty now. I sat down hard, feeling sweat cold on my ribs. Around 3 a.m, I heard a car pull out fast. Tires chirped lightly. The SUV sped away. I watched on the monitor as its taillights vanished. Relief hit me like weakness. My hands shook as I poured coffee that tasted burnt and stale. Then I heard it. A slow, steady, dragging sound. Not outside, inside the motel. Like something heavy being pulled along carpet. It came from the far hallway. I stared at the monitor. The hallway was empty. The room door was closed. But the hallway mirror? The mirror showed movement. A dark shape low to the ground, sliding toward the office end as if crawling without limbs. My breathing turned shallow. I reached for my phone to call the police, but my thumb stopped. Because what would I say? A shadow is crawling in a mirror. Then the motel phone rang again. I didn't pick up. It rang until it stopped. And then, from down the hall, I heard a knock. 3 taps. Not on the office door. On the glass window right in front of me. I stared at the empty space outside. Parking lot lights. No one there. 3 taps again. This time, my eyes lowered, because the sound came from below the window line, where a person's hand shouldn't reach. I backed away from the desk. The air in the office smelled suddenly like damp soil and cheap cologne. I stayed in the back room until morning, sitting on the floor with my knees hugged to my chest, listening for footsteps that never came. When daylight arrived, I went to the far room. I didn't open it. I just looked at the door. The keycard slot was scratched. Deep gouges, like something hard had tried to pull it out. And on the door's peephole there was a smear, like a fingerprint made of soot. I quit that week. My advice? If you're staying at a roadside motel and you notice the mirrors reflect things you don't see in real life, don't argue with your eyes. Pack your stuff. Leave. And now, one more story before we move on. This one comes from behind bars, where the night has its own rules, and not all of them are written by men. The chain sound in Topo Chico. Hello, Senor Williams, and hello to the Carreteras de la Oscuridad community. My name is Ricardo Rico Hernandez. I spent time inside Penal de Topo Chico in Monterrey before it shut down, years ago, but close enough that I still dream in concrete. I'm writing because I heard a story on your channel about a man who couldn't sleep because a sound followed him. I understand that. Some sounds don't stay in one place. I hope I don't interrupt your sleep, but this is what I lived. Prison smells like sweat, disinfectant, and old food left too long in plastic. It also smells like fear even when you pretend it doesn't. I was inside for a charge I still don't like saying out loud. Not because I'm innocent, because the details don't matter anymore. What matters is what that place did to my head. Every night had a rhythm. The guards yelling, the metal doors clanging, men coughing, someone praying softly in a corner. Somewhere, always, a radio playing too low. And the chains. Topo Chico had chain sounds even when nobody was moving chains. You'd hear them in the walls like the building remembered every restraint it ever held. I had a bunk near the back, close to a corridor that stayed darker than the rest. The light above it flickered constantly, buzzing like an insect trapped behind glass. That week, I was already breaking. My mother had stopped visiting. My girlfriend had sent one final message, "Don't call me again." My chest felt hollow, like all the air inside me had been replaced with dust. One night, after lights out, the temperature dropped fast. Not normal cold. Topo Chico was usually hot, even at night. This was different. It felt like a freezer door opened somewhere. I sat up, rubbing my arms. That's when I heard the chain sound. Slow dragging, one link at a time. Not from the hallway, from inside the cell block. Men shifted in their bunks, murmuring. Someone hissed, "Shut up!" But the sound continued, steady. I leaned forward, squinting into the dark. At the far end of the corridor, where the flickering light barely reached, I saw a shape. A man, maybe, standing still. I couldn't see his face, just the outline of shoulders and head. The chain sound came again, and I realized it wasn't dragging on the floor. It was dragging across the wall, like someone was pulling metal along concrete. The sound made my teeth ache. I whispered to my cellmate, "You see that?" He didn't answer. He was facing the wall, eyes shut tight like he was trying to disappear into it. The shape didn't move closer. It didn't speak. But the air grew colder and the smell changed. Not prison smell, something older. Like wet stone, like a basement that's been closed for decades. I lay back down, pulling my thin blanket up. My hands trembled. I told myself, it's a guard, it's someone messing with you, don't react. But then, without any footsteps, I felt pressure at the side of my bunk, like someone standing too close. I opened my eyes. Nothing. I held my breath. The chain sound stopped. And in that silence I heard something else. A faint scratching. Not nails, not rats. More like fabric sliding over concrete. I turned my head slowly toward the corridor. The shape was closer now. Not walking, just closer. My throat tightened so much I couldn't swallow. In the flickering light I saw it better. It looked like a man in an old uniform. Something outdated. But the uniform hung wrong, like it was wearing him instead of the other way around. And where the face should have been, there was only shadow. I squeezed my eyes shut. I started praying, quietly, fast, without meaning the words, just needing sound in my head that wasn't fear. The cold pressure at my bunk edge grew heavier, like someone leaned down. Then my mattress dipped, as if a knee had pressed into it. I didn't scream, I couldn't. My voice was trapped. My cellmate whispered, voice shaking, "Don't look, don't look." The mattress dipped again, closer to my legs. I felt the blanket tighten around my ankles, like something tugged it gently. Not violent, not fast, patient. I pulled my feet up, curling like a child. The chain sound returned, but now it was inside my head, echoing behind my ears. Then, suddenly, the corridor light stopped flickering. It went steady, bright, and everything felt normal again. Warm, loud, human. Men started talking, angry, confused. "What the hell was that?" someone yelled. Guards came through, cursing, shining flashlights, telling everyone to shut up. They found nothing. No broken locks, no loose chains, no intruder. But the next day, an older inmate told me quietly, "That block used to hold men who never made it out. They say one of them still checks the bunks." I laughed like I didn't care, like it was a joke. But that night, when the lights went out, I heard 3 soft taps on the wall behind my head. Not loud, not threatening, just a reminder. I got transferred weeks later, different prison, different block. But sometimes, late at night, I still hear chains in places where there are no chains. My advice? If you're ever locked somewhere you can't leave, and the air suddenly smells like wet stone, don't be tough, don't be loud, be still. Because some things notice confidence the way dogs notice fear. The crying in the hospital stairwell. "Hello, Senor Williams, and good evening to everyone listening to Carreteras de la Oscuridad. My name is Noe Valdivia. I worked night security at a public hospital in Veracruz. I'm writing because I used to think hospitals were safe. Bright places, medical places, places where people fight to live. But at night, when the corridors empty out, hospitals feel like long throats swallowing sound. Turn off the light and walk with me." I took that job after my wife got sick, the kind of sickness that drains your savings before it drains your hope. I worked nights because the pay was a little higher. I drank bitter vending machine coffee and walked the same halls until my feet went numb. Hospitals at night smell like disinfectant and old sweat. Sometimes there's a sour hint of vomit that never fully goes away. The air conditioning is always too cold, making your skin tighten. The night started normal. A nurse joked with me at the entrance. A doctor hurried by, eyes red from exhaustion. The monitors beeped in the background like small birds. Around 2 in the morning, I did my usual round. Stairwells, storage rooms, back exit doors. You check them because people steal equipment, because desperate relatives sneak in, because sometimes employees do things they shouldn't. When I opened the door to stairwell C, I felt a temperature shift. Cold, but not like AC cold, more like stepping near an open freezer. The stairwell was dim, lit by a single bulb that made the concrete look gray-green. The smell there was different, damp, like rain caught in stone. I started down slowly, boots tapping. The sound echoed. Halfway down, I heard crying. Soft, thin. Not a woman wailing, not dramatic, more like a child trying not to be heard. My stomach tightened. Hospitals have kids. Kids cry. That's normal. But it was 2 a.m, and this stairwell wasn't used. Visitors weren't allowed there at night. The doors were locked. I called out softly, "Hey, are you okay?" The crying stopped instantly. Silence. I listened hard. My own breathing sounded too loud. I went down another flight. I shone my flashlight into the corner. No one. Just a wet-looking stain on the concrete like someone had spilled water and never cleaned it. Then the crying started again, above me. Not echoing. Not distant. Right behind the stairwell door I'd entered through. My skin prickled. I turned slowly, flashlight shaking. The door was closed. The tiny window in it showed the hospital corridor, empty. The crying came again, closer, right on the other side of the door. And then I heard 3 soft knocks, fingertips on metal. I backed away, heart pounding, hand on my radio. I didn't call for help. I don't know why. Pride, maybe, or fear of being laughed at, or fear of something worse than laughter. I pushed the door open fast. The corridor was empty. No child, no nurse, no one. But the smell hit me the moment I stepped out. Wet earth. Like the laundry room story you shared, Senor Williams. Like rain and dirt where there shouldn't be any. I shut the door, locked it, and forced myself to continue my rounds. Later that night, we caught a man trying to steal medication from a supply room. He ran. We chased, no violence, just shouting, footsteps, panic. He slipped through a side exit and vanished into the dark street outside. When we returned inside, breathless, the nurse beside me whispered, "Did you hear that?" I listened. From somewhere deep in the hospital, somewhere far from any patient rooms, I heard crying again. The same thin sound. I watched nurses glance at each other, uneasy. Nobody said the obvious. We all pretended it was normal. But after my shift, when I walked to my car, I found mud on my shoes. Fresh mud. Dark and wet. I hadn't stepped outside the hospital except for that chase, and the pavement was dry. I quit a month later. I told my wife it was stress. I told my boss I needed time. The truth is simpler. Some hospitals don't just hold sickness. They hold things that don't leave when the patient does. My advice? If you work nights in a hospital and you hear crying where there shouldn't be anyone, don't go hunting for the source alone. Not because of ghosts. Because the living can use sounds like bait. And sometimes the other thing learns. The animal that kept pace with my headlights. Hello, Senor Williams. Hello, Carreteras de la Oscuridad. My name is Tomas Peña. I drive passenger routes, late-night runs, between Tijuana and Ensenada, sometimes cutting through lonely stretches where the road feels like it belongs to the wind more than people. I'm writing because I've heard too many drivers laugh off animals on the road, until one night, an animal didn't behave like an animal. Apaguen la luz. And imagine the sound of tires eating asphalt in the dark. That week I was dealing with my own mess. My son had moved out after a fight. He said I drank too much. I said he didn't understand what it's like to carry a family on your back. He slammed the door, and the silence he left behind was louder than any argument. So, I took extra routes. Nights, less traffic, more money. The bus interior smelled like fabric seats warmed by bodies that weren't there anymore. Like leftover human heat, the dash smelled like plastic and dust. My coffee tasted metallic because I'd been reheating it too many times. Around 1:30 in the morning, the road emptied out. The ocean air was cold and salty, but inland it turned dry. Fog hugged the low parts of the road, thin as breath. I saw it at the edge of my headlights. A shape, low to the ground, moving parallel to the bus. At first, I thought it was a dog. Stray dogs run those roads sometimes. But this thing ran too smoothly, too evenly. It stayed exactly at the edge of my light beam, never falling behind, never coming fully into view. I slowed slightly. The shape slowed. I sped up. The shape sped up. My throat tightened. I told myself it's just matching your speed because it's scared. Then, as the bus rounded a gentle curve, the headlights swept wider, and for a second I saw the animal's outline clearly. It wasn't a dog. Its back was too high, shoulders too pronounced. Its legs looked longer than they should be. And its head was low, stretched forward, like something built for hunting. The worst part was the way it moved. Not like sprinting, but like gliding in controlled strides, almost silent. I felt sweat gather under my arms. I glanced in my side mirror. The road behind me was empty. No cars, no motorcycles, no reason for my nerves to be this sharp. Then I heard a sound from inside the bus, a soft thump, like someone shifting in a seat. My stomach dropped. I had checked the bus before leaving. I always do. It was empty. I tightened my grip on the wheel and glanced back through the aisle. The seats were empty, but the thump came again. Closer, like something stepping lightly on the floor. I forced my eyes back to the road. The animal was still there, matching my headlights. And then it did something I still can't explain. It turned its head toward me. Not toward the road, toward the bus, toward my window. And in that brief angle, I saw its eye reflect the headlight. Bright, pale, almost white. Just one flash. Then the fog thickened and the animal vanished. I exhaled hard, trying to calm down, telling myself it ran off. Inside the bus, the thumping stopped. I reached the next lit checkpoint area and pulled into a gas station, parking under bright lamps. My heart was still racing, but I needed to check the bus. I walked the aisle slowly, flashlight in hand, listening for any sound. Nothing. No hidden passenger, no animal, no sign. But when I reached the last row, I saw the seat fabric was damp. Not spilled drink, not rain. Damp in a streak, like something wet had brushed against it. And the smell there, strong and sudden, was wet earth. I left the bus doors open for a long time, letting air move through, trying to convince myself it was nothing. But on my drive home, when I passed that same stretch again in daylight days later, I noticed something on the shoulder, a line of prints in the dust. Not paw prints, not hoof prints, longer, narrower, too deep. Like something heavy had walked there on feet that didn't belong to anything I know. My advice? If you're driving at night and something keeps pace with your headlights like it's playing a game, don't slow down to get a better look. Because sometimes, the moment you see it clearly, it learns you can see it too.